Have you ever stopped to think about whether you are really on the right side? In the world we live in, political, ideological, and cultural divisions seem to be the most important issue. But what if I told you that God sees the world in a completely different way, that the divisions that really matter are not political but spiritual? We live in a time when political and ideological differences have dominated conversations, dinner tables, and even churches. In the United States, as the video shows, the divisions between Democrats and Republicans are deep and often result in family, social, and even spiritual conflicts. Many Christians allow themselves to be swept along by this current, forgetting that there is a division much more important than any electoral dispute. The spiritual division that God sees, the illusion of political division. Amid heated political debates, many believe that their identity is tied to a party or ideology. Polarization intensifies with each election, as if our salvation depends on who is in power. But is that really what matters? The Bible shows us that the real division runs much deeper. In 1 Corinthians 1:18, Paul teaches us that the world is divided between those who are perishing and those who are being saved. That is the only line that truly matters to God. Yet we see Christians placing their hope in human leaders and political platforms. This is a danger, for politics is temporary, but the kingdom of God is eternal. While many debate fervently about who should rule, the question we must ask is, are we aligned with the eternal King? God is not concerned with political parties, He is concerned with souls. Political division is a distraction that takes us away from what really matters. It's easy to get lost in debates about politics, but we need to remember that in the end, what matters is our position before God, not before a party. This is the perspective we should have as Christians. The true division that God sees is not between right and left, but between those who accept the message of the cross and those who reject it. This is the line that divides the world in God's eyes, and it transcends any human ideology. We need to remember that politics may influence society, but only the gospel has the power to save. The message of the cross is what really matters, and it is through it that our true identity is formed. The spiritual division. When we look at the Bible, we see that God divides the world into two groups, the saved and the lost. This division is clear and unequivocal. 1 Corinthians 1:18 reminds us that the message of the cross is foolishness to those who are perishing, but to us who are being saved, it is the power of God. There is no gray area here. You are on one side or the other of that line. This reality is even more shocking when we consider that this division occurs even within our families, churches, and communities. Imagine an invisible line that separates husbands and wives, parents and children, close friends. While many are concerned with political issues, God sees a much deeper and eternal divide. What really matters to God is not whether we vote for A or B, but whether we embrace the message of the cross. Our response to the gospel is what determines which side of this divide we are on. This is the line that defines our eternity. The spiritual division that God sees is a present reality. We are often surrounded by people who are perishing, and this truth should move us to action. We cannot be content to simply observe. We must engage in God's mission. This division is a reality that should bring us urgency. We need to share the gospel with those who have not yet accepted the message of the cross, because time is short and eternity is at stake. The urgency of the mission. The reality of this division should awaken us to the urgency of God's mission. Jesus gave us the Great Commission, and it is not optional. Our responsibility as Christians is to carry the message of the cross to those who are perishing. We cannot allow political distractions to distract us from this calling. Every day, thousands of people enter eternity without Christ. This should motivate us to set aside earthly divisions and focus on the salvation of souls. We need to see people the way God sees them. They are either being saved or they are perishing. This reality should shape our priorities. While many are concerned about the upcoming election cycle, we need to be focused on God's eternal kingdom. What are we doing to ensure that more people are in the saved group? Our mission is not to win political debates, but to win souls for Christ. We must be intentional about sharing the gospel, for that is the only message that can save. The urgency of mission cannot be ignored. As Christians, we have the privilege and responsibility to proclaim the gospel. We must do everything in our power to reach those who are perishing. The danger of spiritual neutrality. The Bible is clear. There is no such thing as spiritual neutrality. You are either on God's side or you are against him. Matthew 7:13-14 warns us that broad is the road that leads to destruction, but narrow is the way that leads to life. Many people believe they can sit on the fence, but the truth is that this option does not exist in God's eyes. This is a sobering warning to all of us. We need to examine our lives and ask, whose side are we on? Are we living according to kingdom values, or are we being carried away by the ideologies of the world? The spiritual divide that God sees is absolute, and there is no middle ground. We need to understand that our faith must be intentional. We cannot live passively, waiting for things to work themselves out. The road to life is narrow, and few find it. We must make every effort to walk that path. Spiritual neutrality is a dangerous trap. Many are being carried away by this current, believing that they can postpone their decision for Christ. But the reality is that with each passing day, we are closer to our eternity. We must be diligent in our pursuit of God and in our mission to lead others to Christ. The road is narrow, but the reward is eternal. Aligning with the kingdom of God. The division that really matters is not political but spiritual. As Christians, we are called to align ourselves with the kingdom of God, not the kingdoms of this world. Our hope should not be in human leaders, but in the one eternal King, Jesus Christ. When we understand this, our perspective changes. We no longer allow ourselves to be distracted by the distractions of this world, but focus on what is eternal. Our true citizenship is in heaven, and our allegiance is first to Christ. This alignment with the kingdom of God leads us to live differently. We are called to be light in the world, proclaiming the gospel and living according to kingdom values. This means that we cannot allow ourselves to be consumed by earthly divisions. Our role as Christians is to be agents of reconciliation, not division. We need to remember that our calling is higher than any political agenda. The kingdom of God is our priority, and we must live accordingly. When we align ourselves with the kingdom of God, we find our true identity and purpose, and it is this identity that gives us the strength to resist the divisions of the world and live in unity with Christ. If this message touched your heart, I encourage you to reflect deeply on which side of this divide you are on. Share this video with someone who needs to hear this message. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, do so now to receive more inspiring messages that will help you grow in your walk with Christ. Remember, the real division that God sees is not political, but spiritual. May we be on the right side of that line, the side of those who have embraced the cross and live for the glory of God. And may we together carry this message to the world, remembering that eternity is what really matters. May God bless you.